Hello and welcome to Everyday Oral Surgery. This is your host, Dr. Grant Stucki. I am an oral and maxillofacial surgeon practicing in Denver, Colorado. The goal of this podcast is to connect, learn, and inspire. In this podcast, you'll be hearing from OMS surgeons all over the globe discussing ways to improve the practice of oral and maxillofacial surgery. Most information shared in this podcast will be based on personal experience and opinions, so please supplement what you learn here with approved research studies. Without further ado, please enjoy today's episode. All right, welcome everyone to another episode. Today I'm with Dr. Roger Levin, the CEO of Levin Group. Roger, thank you so much for joining us on another episode.
Grant, I'm delighted. You're doing such a great job with this podcast, and I'm just thrilled to be here and hope we'll help a lot of people with good information.
Yeah, so I've gotten a lot of great feedback. A lot of people have really loved our episodes, ton of great content for those who are really in any form of practice, but especially in private practice. And so great topics. So today we were thinking we would focus a little bit on marketing and some of the ways that marketing plans can fail. Could you kind of kick us off and tell us your thoughts on this one?
Absolutely. I've titled this one, Why Your Referral Marketing Program Can Fail, but the real intent is to keep everybody from failing and being successful. And over the last 40 years, with thousands of referral marketing surgical practices and surgeons, we've learned a lot about success and failure. And the truth is, Grant, one of the things we learn is that you learn a lot more from your failures than your successes, because when you're successful, our brain thinks we deserve it. We've worked hard, gone to dental school, gone through a residency. We believe we should be successful, so we don't tend to hyper-analyze why we're successful. But when we fail, we tend to really focus on that a lot and try to learn from it. So I thought it might be interesting for us to do this two-part podcast on what I've learned about failure, how to avoid it, and how people can be really successful.
Yeah, that's so great. What a great topic. Do you want to start with the biggest one, or do you want to start at the bottom and say the smallest one and work up? What are your thoughts?
No, I'm going to start with the biggest one,
okay.
which is kind of fun. And I encourage everybody really pay attention, because I'm going to make statements, but nothing's 100%. In statistical probability, nothing's 100%. But this first statement's really important. You want to try in your referral marketing strategy development and implementation to become the dominant practice in your area. Now, every surgeon, and most surgeons, not all, are fairly type A competitive individuals. We love them as clients for that reason. They're go-getters. But every surgeon hearing that says, yeah, I want to be the dominant in my area. Of course I do. Now, everybody can't be the dominant. So the first thing I want to point out is, if you're not the dominant, it does not mean failure. You can have an incredible career and not necessarily be the dominant. My point is, you want to work toward being the dominant. You want to put together a referral marketing program. And remember, referral marketing is the single most important factor in the success of an OMS practice, because without referrals, it doesn't matter how incredible a clinician you are, how great your customer service is, how well-trained your team is. All are success principles, but you have to have those referrals. And referrals are about relationships. And you might be in an area where there's a dominant practice of 6 or 8 surgeons. They've been there forever. They have 7 practices. You might be that group, and you might be a solo competing against them, but it doesn't mean you can't work toward being dominant, because when you do, you're always thinking about, what are the best relationship building strategies I can put in place? How can I serve our referring doctors better? How can I help them to be more successful? And the reality is, it all starts with a mentality of being dependent. So point 1, work toward being the dominant practice. Point 2, remember that you're dependent on referring doctors. Now, that's a negative. Nobody likes to be dependent. If you've ever lent money to a family member, the odds are they resent you, especially if you try to collect it. I've asked many, many people if they ever lent money to family members, and they say yes. And I say, well, how did it go? Typically not really well. So my advice, if you're lending money to a family member, is just give it to them and forget it, because you're not going to get it back, and then they're going to resent you anyway. Nobody likes to be dependent. But if a surgeon says, I'm dependent on these referring doctors for my success, you develop a different mindset. So number two, remember you're dependent on them and they are critical, because if you have great relationships, they're going to refer to you. So it's so important to have an attitude of wanting to be dominant by being dependent. And that sounds almost like it's counterintuitive, but the best surgeons with the best referrals actually do think that way, that they are there to serve their referring doctors and build great relationships, and they never forget it, no matter how successful they become. The danger being that as Grant, you or I or anyone becomes successful, we start to think it was because of us only. And I heard a fantastic definition of the word arrogance a few years ago, and I will never forget it, and I try to live by it. Arrogance is becoming successful and then acting like it. So don't do that. Become successful and stay appreciative and build relationships with your referring doctors. And that's the attitude part of referral marketing. We'll get real specific as we go, but I think it starts with a great attitude.
I like that. So when you flip, because each one of these points is like a coin. You got one side is the success, one side is the failure. So I assume, of course, there's probably situations where someone is maybe not working toward being the dominant and they're just happy being the kind of guy who can clean up the messes but doesn't get the bulk of the referrals, things like that. So how do you, I guess, get that mentality? How do you make that step and say, we're going for dominant, not just like the crumbs here?
Dominant is about the strategies. If you want to be dominant, it's not a natural thing. It's about developing strategies. And that brings me to my next major point. So in 1985, I had this idea, and I presented it at Amos, which I talked about in our first podcast, and it actually worked. And I say that with great humility, because I had an idea, it was untested. Over the last 40 years, we've done nothing but test it and help surgeons to be successful with referral marketing, and that's the word quantity. Too many surgeons rely on a small number of strategies and think that's why they're successful, but it really isn't. When you first go into practice, a lot of surgeons don't have a lot of money, so they run around meeting and greeting and touching referring doctors, which is a fantastic way to build relationships. And they do a lot of quantity. I remember surgeons who would go to lunch twice in a day if they could get two doctors to go, because they were hungry and they were building. And then gradually become successful. And it's not even arrogance at that point. It's equilibrium. Like you assume I've made it. Everything's great. It'll just continue indefinitely. But unfortunately, it doesn't. And they'll have a few key strategies in place that really are not going to do the job long term. So my next point in what reasons your referral marketing program can fail is not having enough strategies. We've put the number 15. We believe an OMS practice needs at least 15 strategies, all functioning together, focused on referring doctors throughout the year. Some are ongoing, like deliveries. Some are one time, like seminars or parties or special events. And others come and go and get changed depending on the relevance of the time. If you don't have somewhere around 15 strategies that you build gradually over time and carry them out, then you don't have enough, and you're missing that quantity factor, which will really hurt a referral marketing program. Because one of my sayings is, if they're not hearing from you, they're not thinking of you. We've been very successful, and it used to surprise me years ago, just paying a lot more attention to referring doctors increases referrals. Now, I used to ask myself, why would it do that? And I learned that the quantity, the touch points, and the number of touch points are just as important as the quality of the strategies.
Okay. So having a sufficient amount of strategies and keeping those maintained and building, and not just paring it down to 2 or 3 over time.
Yeah, we meet people who will be spending a lot of money on 2 or 3 gigantic events a year, and they think that's all it takes at that point, that everybody lives for those events. They have nothing else in their lives, and as long as they do those events, they'll get referrals. But over time, we get calls from surgeons who will say, well, the attendance at my party is not what it used to be. The attendance at my seminars is not what it used to be. The strategies have to be relevant, but they also have to have quantity. Now, the flip side of that is having quantity but poor quality strategies. And I told the story in one of our podcasts together about one of our consultants who was in a general practice, and a specialist practice sent over a food delivery, but it had no name on it. And they thanked our consultant for having this food delivered to the practice, which we didn't do. It wasn't us. So rule one, never send anything. The first thing we like to do for new clients is design a beautiful card that goes on everything they ever deliver, so there's no question of how it got there. But poor quality strategies are also a detriment. And there are a lot of old school strategies. There are GPs who don't want to go to lunch. When I first started recommending strategies, lunch was twice a week minimum. Every surgeon needed to be at lunch twice a week. We try to put numbers on everything. Today, there are GPs who don't do lunch. Our Thursday afternoon happy hours have gotten very popular. Taking couples, 2 or 3 GP couples to dinner has gotten very popular. Sadly, the quality of the restaurant is a big factor. You need a good restaurant. You would think people wouldn't think that way, but they really do appreciate it. So you want to be relevant. One of the questions every surgeon should be asking is, are our strategies relevant? If you're still teaching implant clinical education, that used to be an incredible route to get more implant referrals. Well, some of that is not the same as it used to be. What do people want to know today? I sit on a panel every Friday, a national panel, and if the speaker is on something the GPs are interested in, that national panel followed by a speaker will literally get double the number of attendees if it's a topic that GPs find interesting. So I remember going to one presentation by surgeons where they spent 45 minutes showing how they repaired the skull from a motorcycle accident. It was very interesting, but nobody actually cared because it wasn't relevant to the GP practice. So make sure you're relevant at all times, because if you're not relevant, you're becoming obsolete and somebody else will take that position for you.
Got it. So is that's the point of, so you have enough quantity of strategies, but those strategies have to be quality and relevant and important.
They do. And right now, I'm joking, but I envision some of our listeners shaking at the thought of, how am I going to get 15 strategies out there, even if they're relevant? So one of the number one reasons of why your referral marketing program can fail, and in this one case, I'm going to say will fail. Now, I don't do scary stuff. None of this is to scare anybody. I'm really trying to help, but you need a PRC, professional relations coordinator. And this person in a 1 to 2 doctor practice needs a minimum of 16 to 20 hours a week. 20 is better. We have a new client, 3 doctors. They need 24 to 26 hours a week. We tell people this. It'd be much nicer to say, oh, don't worry about it, just join our program. That'd be a better sales position, but I always tell people I don't do sales. I do great conversations. I really am transparent. If you cheat on your PRC time, your professional relations coordinator, your program's going to be in trouble, because surgeons don't have time, and nor should they, to carry out the program. 95% of this program should be carried out by a dedicated staff member who is not an assistant and not an office manager. Why? Office managers are busy. They put out fires every day. And when the fire is happening, they're not thinking about marketing, and they will cheat on the amount of time needed for marketing, as they probably should. And assistants get pulled into the clinical area whenever they're busy, which blows up their time. So you need someone who can really sequester specific hours to the PRC time and do the job. And this is the person who gets it done. And they're as much a member of the team as anyone else. They're not an afterthought. Surgeons need at least, many practices have multiple surgeons. It needs to be the head of marketing surgeon who meets with this PRC at least 15, 20 minutes a week to review what's being done and to make sure the program's being carried out properly. And this is not a delivery person like it used to be 25 years ago. This person builds relationships with the referring offices. She's a customer service representative. We will give her specific questions to ask, such as, what can we do to make it easier for you to refer to our practice? Are you satisfied with everything we're doing for you and your practice? She is a person who's going to return between $8 and $10 million every 20 years to the practice, which is huge.
Yes, that is huge. This person, the PRC, is is their full-time job, or at least it's nearing full-time? Like you're talking about 25 to 30 hours per week?
Yeah, and if once you get to 4 surgeons, you need a full-time person. If you have 8 surgeons, you need 2 full-time people. But each one of them will create an amazing return on investment for the practice. Probably the way I describe it is you'll probably never own a stock or a real estate investment or a bond that will pay you back anywhere near the PRC. If I were a surgeon, the first investment I would make, both for my practice and myself, would be in a PRC. Because if they do the job properly, the flow of referrals is massive. And that begins to tie it together. That begins to move you toward that dominant practice position. Even if you don't become dominant, you'll be a lot closer. So this person's critical. Now, honestly, Grant, you can't put an ad on Indeed or one of the online recruiting sites that you'll suddenly get highly skilled, highly qualified PRCs applying for the job. They just don't exist. So somebody does have to put the time in to train them and educate them and go over the strategies and track them. They do need to be managed. And oddly enough, and maybe it's a natural course of nature, many office managers resent having to deal with PRCs. They view them as some afterthought, maybe because they're not part of the day-to-day operations to get through the day. And you have to make sure your office manager, if she's managing the PRC, is supporting that PRC, not resenting that PRC. That's a big factor we've seen in why your referral marketing program can fail, or office managers who really resent having to deal with the PRCs at all. The PRC is a long-term strategy, not a day-to-day immediate return strategy.
Okay. And can this PRC, because I could see doctors wanting to like hire some online service or somebody who can do all this remotely, but I assume this PRC person would need to go into the offices and make their face known and be someone who's pretty social and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's about half the job. That's why you can't hire one of these overseas companies to simply take care of it for you, because it's about relationships. Again, the PRC is a person. She represents the practice. She is going into offices. We give them scripts to go in with to build relationships. Because as you know, when you first walk in there, you're an interruption. They're looking at you like, why are you here? Now, oddly enough, and people will laugh at this, but it's absolutely real, always bring food. Never walk into a GP office, surgeon or PRC, without food. In my life, our veterinarian, my physician, other medical appointments, I always bring a dozen donuts. And I don't really want anything extra. I'm already paying for it. I'm going to get what I get. But when you walk in with a dozen donuts, which is pretty inexpensive, people just light up. And now when I walk in, I can see they're looking at my hands to see if I brought the donuts, because I always do this. So whether it's donuts or whatever, if you walk in with food, it says, I like you. I'm glad to be here. We value you. And all of a sudden you go from, I know it sounds funny, but you go from interruption to welcome guests when you do that. And the funniest thing is I remember one office said, oh, everyone's on diets here. And at the end of the week, the GP called the surgeon and said, I know we told her everyone's on diets, but at 5 o'clock, there were no donuts left in the box. So, Americans love sugar. We got to have our sugar in us at all times. So the next major reason for failure is almost natural. And I call it the laziness factor. And I don't mean lazy as in critical. Surgeons are the least lazy people on the planet. I mean, these are hardworking people. You got through residencies. You put in unbelievable hours. You do the big cases and the complex cases. But as we get more successful, we get lazy in the areas that we think will just continue. I mentioned equilibrium earlier. And, our lives get busy. When I was growing up and I was a really serious child athlete back in the Middle Ages. I played 3 varsity sports, but football was football season, and wrestling was wrestling season, and tennis was tennis season. There was no year-round sports. There was no traveling league. You didn't have 500 different types of activities. And although it'll be shocking to some of your listeners, there wasn't even an internet. So life was not simpler, perhaps, but it was less overwhelming. Today, I see parents running all over the country on weekends for traveling league sports and this activity and that activity. And life gets complicated for surgeons too, because you're trying to build a practice. You're trying to take care of your family. You want to have a life. I get that. I think everybody should have a work-life balance. But to that end, what gets put on the side burner because things look okay is referral marketing. And the strategies start to fall off. You go from 15 to 10 to 5 to 4. The PRC quits because it's going to happen over time and you don't get another one. And next thing you know, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years goes by. And Grant, I can tell you there's a syndrome right now. We're talking about it heavily at Levin Group. So anything we're talking about, surgeons should be aware of, which is we're getting a lot of calls in the last 90 days from surgeons who are finding that some of their top referral sources have either sold their practice or they have retired or they brought in associates who think they can do the surgery. And we're getting calls from people saying, hey, I got a really good practice, and they do, but I've lost one or more top referral sources. And when they don't tell you they're going to sell and give you 2 years notice to work on it, and they don't tell you they're going to bring in an associate who's going to try to do the surgery, and whether they're qualified or not. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you've got a top referral source who suddenly went away. So based on that, get lazy. And I say lazy not as a criticism, but in any way, shape, or form, but don't take your eye off the ball. When good companies are doing well, they spend more money on marketing, not less money on marketing. And that's the same for surgeons. When you're doing well, you can percentage of dollars you need to spend versus revenue on marketing goes down, but the total dollar outlay needs to go up every year. And that's a good benchmark. Spending more dollars on marketing every year is a good indicator you're doing the right things, versus if you spend less dollars, it may not be because you're trying to save money. You may just not be doing enough because you're not focused on it. And again, marketing always seems like it can be put off till tomorrow. The emergency can't be put off till tomorrow. The angry GP can't be put off till tomorrow. The new regulation can't be put off. Some of our clinical training can't be put off. Marketing is not urgent, even though I think it should always be not urgent, but clearly important going forward. So don't rest on your laurels is my advice. And if you've been resting on your laurels, it takes very little to gear back up. And within 5 to 6 months, your referrals will start to grow again, if you follow the principles we're talking about in this program today.
Okay. So pay it its due respect and keep it going. I mean, do you have tips on how to keep doctors motivated? Because I mean, I think everyone falls into that trap. You know, you got tons of patients, you're super successful after a few years, and it's like, well, why? Why do we keep putting all this money into marketing? I'd rather just save it.
Well, I'll go deep on this one. I don't like to go too deep and too philosophical, but leadership is about delegation. And most people, me, you, most surgeons, really excel only at one thing. I mean, surgeons are the best oral surgeons in the world. There aren't that many of them. I know surgeons criticize each other because I'm a general dentist. I know we always criticize each other and somebody wants to be the best. And I'm out of that because I don't practice today. But I remember going to meetings and, when I went through the Pankey Institute, someone would say, oh, you did Pankey and you learned this and that. And I've done Pankey. And somehow that made us feel like we were better than other dentists, which was really not the important thing. It was about learning. So, but the reality is that, most surgeons are really good surgeons. They're highly trained and they do a really good job. And to that end, excel at surgery. So the goal of success and leadership is to always do what you excel at and try to get rid of everything else. And that's where the PRC comes in. If you can get a trained PRC to carry out the referral marketing, that's an excellent delegation principle. Just like office managers. There's every level of office manager in dentistry. 96% of dental office managers have no management background, or experience. So their office managers were the surgeons still running the practice. If I had a surgery practice, I would want my office manager to run all day-to-day operations, take care of hiring, firing, discipline, whatever has to be done. I just want to do surgery, which is the most productive thing surgeons do and what they love to do. So the key to staying motivated is to delegate the marketing, not abdicate, delegate, but then have regular meetings to check in and have at least 5 or 6 numbers that you track regularly to evaluate the overall performance. And you can do that in 15 minutes a week rather than the surgeon trying to run the program, finding it overwhelming and not really wanting to continue doing it. So that delegation principle goes to the heart of do what you excel at, surgery, delegate everything else by being a great leader and training other people, and then stop managing them and start measuring them. If you have to manage them, you've got the wrong people. If you measure them, you'll know how they're performing. The only place the surgeon can interface with marketing is coming up with some of the new strategies that will be necessary. And one of the things we do all the time at Levin Group is we study the business world for marketing ideas that we can bring back to referral marketing for our clients. So look at other companies, industries, read the news, and you'll find all kinds of ideas out there.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that a lot. One question going back to the food, why not bring a vegetable tray and olive oil instead of donuts?
Well, okay. So just so you know, I eat very, very healthy. I eat extremely clean, extremely healthy. I'm obsessed with my health and fitness, and I hope to stay healthy for a long time. So I eat a Tom Brady style diet, if anybody wants to look that up. Not exactly the same, but there's an institute in Orlando, in Miami called the Pritikin Longevity Institute. I'm a devotee, been there a number of times. Nice. And I follow that program. Okay. Having said that, if you know somebody is like that, that's great. Take the vegetable tray. But I hate to say it, you can't beat sugar for most people. So it doesn't have to be donuts. It doesn't have to be cookies. It doesn't have to be goodies. But I can tell you from years of experience, the referring practices love it. And who loves it? The staff. That's right. I'll be honest. I think the staff of many GP offices does not get enough appreciation in the office. We're not trained as leaders. I've lectured on it endlessly. Appreciate, recognize, and compliment people all day long. But when you come in and you bring something people like, and I've seen it myself with the donuts I take where I go, people light up. And when they light up, that's what you want. So unfortunately, we're not their nutritionists. We're trying to build great relationships. But I do agree with you because that's how I eat every day. So.
Same here. Yeah. I also am a big longevity, Tom Brady diet type of a person.
Yeah. But if you show up with a box of tofu, it just doesn't have the same results. I like tofu. So.
Yes. Oh, that's hilarious. Well, the other point you brought up was that, how we're all really good at one thing. It sounds pretty basic and simple to understand that. But I think as surgeons, oftentimes we don't realize that. And for some reason, as surgeons, we think we're good at everything, or maybe we want to be good, or maybe we have that in common. Our moms all told us we were good at everything. And a lot of us micromanage. A lot of us feel like we have to have our hand in everything that's going on in the practice. And I think, like you're saying, that sometimes does more harm than good. You need to focus on the 1 or 2 things you really do well and delegate and let that stuff go and not drive everyone crazy by thinking you are the best at everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I personally take 6 clients a year, which keeps me very grounded for executive coaching, not for management consulting, not for referral marketing. We've got great consultants that do that. But I have my own 6 clients. And in fact, one, I just helped sell his practice after working together for 7 years. He was ready. And literally this morning, an oral surgeon became client 6. So there's no solicitation here. I don't take more than 6. So I want everybody to know I'm not seeking clients. I wouldn't take another one right now. I usually have a waiting list, but this surgeon became a client this morning out of Las Vegas. and I'm delighted to work with him. And in executive coaching, one of the things I tell them is and I'll be glad to cover this in another podcast, there are 4 levels of surgeons. Level 1 is more of the startup phase, get going. You are doing everything. You're the chief cook and bottle washer. The staff is pitching in everywhere. And make sure you hire staff members that are willing to pitch in everywhere, because if they're trenched in their job, they're not going to be very helpful in your first couple years of a startup. And then you go to level 2. Now, a lot of surgeons skip level 1. They join a practice. It exists. That's fantastic because the model's there. The downside is they don't feel like they have to market because the practice already has referrals coming in the door. And level 2 is where you're growing. You should be growing. You're growing. You're adding staff because you're seeing more patients. You're doing more. Level 2 is fun. Again, the beginning of each level is great. The end of each level is exhausting. Because at the end of level 2, you figure out, okay, I need better systems. I need a better way to work. And you get to level 3. Now, here's the important point for today. What you were saying, level 3 is where most surgeons will stop. They will not get to level 4. You're micromanaging to some degree, or you're not managing, or you're not training, you're too involved. You're not delegating everything you possibly can through excellent systems and training the team. And you don't recognize that the only thing a surgeon should be doing is surgery. And the most successful surgeons, and people for that matter that I know, only do what they do best. And I'll tell you a story in a second. So as a surgeon, your goal is to get to level 4. You will have the most financial reward, and even more important, the most enjoyable practice and life. Because you literally, at level 4 leadership, I call it, you walk in the morning, you attend a meeting about the day, you don't run it, you see patients all day, the assistants tell you where you should be all day long, and you leave on time most days. It's an incredible life doing what you do best. And you can easily do 20 to 30% more surgery and production because you're not doing all of these other things. And maybe a good analogy is a friend of mine who is what's called a turnaround CEO. He gets hired to go into companies, and he's always got multiple offers because he's really good at this. He goes into companies that are in trouble, and he will go in there and do whatever needs to be done to save the company and turn it around and put it back on a growth track. His average tenure is 3 years. And I once said to him, don't you ever want to stay and grow it and see the results of all the work that you've put in? And he said, Roger, that would be the worst thing I could do. After about 3 years, I am bored. I want to move on. I would be the worst maintenance CEO you can imagine. I do best with turnarounds. And that realization has made him incredibly successful and in demand. Surgeons do best with surgery. That's what they should be doing. And everything else can be delegated to trained people, including, and very important, the referral marketing. Now, you can bring ideas and thoughts and strategies and training, but you should not be doing this day to day. And these are the surgeons who have the highest production levels, but also the most fun. And I still think fun is really important in a career, because you're not going to get to do your 40 years all over again if you get it wrong.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right. What's our next point?
The next point's huge. This is really huge. And one of the reasons your referral marketing program can fail, our title and topic for today, is you ignore your C's and your D's. Now, for anyone who doesn't know this, I don't know if I came up with A, B, C, or D. I think I remember hitting upon it in 1985. I honestly can't remember if somebody else had come up with it first or not, and I copied it. If they did, I would love to give them credit. But we break the referral base up into 4 categories: A, B, C, and D. And you don't want to make it too complicated. I mean, you could break it up into 100 categories, but what are you going to do with that? Your A's are your best referral sources. Typically, they will make up about 60% of your production. Your B's are your next best. They're good referral sources. They'll make up about 30% of your production. Your C's, well, surgeons hate their C's because their view is C's don't refer to them. They almost interpret it as C's don't like them, because if they could refer and they don't, you feel like there must be some reason they're not referring. And they make up about 10%. And your D's don't refer at all. We don't resent them as much because we have nothing to do with them. Over time, and I'll say this now and I'll come back to it later or in our next part too, Your A's are certainly your most valuable. Never lose an A, and we'll come back to that. But what's important here is a lot of surgeons ignore C's and D's. I can tell you, and I hold nothing back. I'm happy to educate as much as I can, that in our consulting program, we immediately break up by names, by the names. Who are the A's? Who are the B's? Who are the C's? Who are the D's? And we strengthen those A relationships immediately, and the B's. We want to turn B's into A's. But for this point, the C's are invaluable because many of the C's never turned on because you didn't do enough with them. You didn't build enough relationship with them. And you're not going to get them all, but we bring many C's up to an A and B level in under 12 months. And that's where part of the growth comes from in referral marketing. So don't ignore your C's and D's. And a lot of surgeons resent them or feel they have no value or they'll never turn on. And yes, we think about the one C we had a problem with who turned off and doesn't refer to us. Okay, you might not get them, but there are a lot of C's and D's out there that are very open to building a great relationship. Now, one reason your program can fail is if you don't pay enough attention to your referring doctors, somebody else will, and gradually they'll take them away. And I hate to say it this way because I don't want to foster a sense of competition, but that's exactly what we do. When we get new referral sources for practices, they're coming from somewhere, and it's because somebody's paying a lot more attention to them than somebody else, whether it's service, whether it's support, whether it's just relationship. And general dentists are very open to new referrals, to referring to new doctors as they get to know them and like them. That's really important. So do not ignore your C's and D's. Make a list of them next week or tomorrow and ask yourself, when's the last time you talked to one of these C's or one of these D's? Because if you don't touch them, you're not going to bring them in as referral sources.
That's a good point. So making sure you're reaching out to them when you see referrals from doctors you don't recognize, that's, once every couple of years or whatever. Probably as soon as you see those names, you need to call them, see what's going on, get to know them.
Yeah. And then the corollary point, because we try to put numbers on things at Levin Group, is 15% of your marketing time and effort should be focused on D's, doctors who don't refer. And here's a great strategy. You're going to get referrals who come to you, but were not referred to you. So a patient comes to you, Grant, that was referred to someone else. And I'll give you two examples. The second one's really fun. But what do we do with that referral that just came to us, even though they weren't referred to us? Well, we treat them well. We send the report. Point one, clinical reports are not marketing. 5% of them are never read by general dentists other than maybe an implant report, so they know what they have to do next. Clinical reports are not referral marketing. We don't count them. They're not touch points. We track all these numbers with our clients, and clinical reports don't get scored in our program at all. So instead, when you get a D referral, you should go out of your way to contact the GP, find a way to touch them, preferably by phone, use that call as a chance to get together. You use that as an opportunity to get in front of them and to start to build some type of relationship, whether you stop by, you have lunch, you have a drink, whatever it may be. I've got a million points here that I'll throw in along the way. Whenever you are with a GP, always bring something clinically interesting. GPs love to see clinical cases, clinical interest. Always bring something interesting. If you're going to lunch, to dinner, get together, stopping by, bring something that they will find interesting. Ask yourself what might be of interest to them. The second point is when you as a surgeon, and Grant, I'll bet this has happened to you, D, who does not refer to you, sends you a family member. And we hear this all the time. All of a sudden, they send over a family member, not to the practice they normally refer to, but to a certain surgeon. And that surgeon says, oh my God, why did they do that? They did it because they know I'm better than who they work with. And when they see how well I take out these thirds or place this implants, and of course you don't charge them, then you'll resent it forever. They're going to send me everything because now they're showing me that they know for their family, I'm the doctor of choice, not the person they normally work with, who, by the way, will also do it happily for free. And then you send the patient back and you send the family member back and you send the report and you don't charge for the thirds or whatever. And you wait. and you wait and you wait because nothing else comes. And you can't believe it. And then you're mad because you didn't charge them. And maybe this is the second kid or third kid in the family you've done this for. Well, in how your referral marketing program can fail, and failure includes D's who you never turn on, because you're not going to turn them all on, but you should be turning some on over time with good focus, and that 15% of the time and effort focused on the D's who do not refer. You didn't use that family member as a chance to build a relationship. If you're treating their kid, they're going to talk to you. They're going to get together with you. If you're putting an implant in their spouse or their parent, they're going to want to get together with you when you want to go over the case. But instead, you just sent back a clinical report. Don't mistake the referral for future referral stream. You have to go make that happen. And if you don't, the odds are if they were a D before, they'll be a D after. And all you'll do is resent that you didn't charge them for the case. So I share that thought for you.
Yes, I'm sure we've all experienced that. And I like that sentiment of not just saying, oh, they recognize I'm a great surgeon, so there's not really much I have to do. They know that already, so they're just going to keep sending me. You're saying you have to really go out of your way to connect with them, have a good discussion, plan the case, not assume that they're going to keep sending you people if you don't do anything.
And use every contact to set up the next contact. Again, if I were a surgeon, and I say that with respect, every time I'm with a GP, I'd be looking for something they're interested in that can lead to a next step. Let me get an article for you on that. Let me recommend a webinar. Let me, whatever it may be, how can you be of help to them? We have one surgeon. I mean, I've got a million stories because I've been doing this for 40 years and our consultants have had so many surgeons, but there was a surgeon who was on the board of a dental school. And there was a GP who had never referred, wasn't that far away, and picked up the phone and called the surgeon. And this is a little bit of audacity, and said, my son really wants to go to dental school. He's slightly below qualified GPA, but he's really dedicated and he's really matured. And the surgeon said, I'll do everything I can to help you. But he also used it as an opportunity to keep the dentist informed. The child did get into dental school and the GP became an A referral source through that process. Now, that's a one-off. We can't all be on the board of a dental school, et cetera. But the reality is that you look for the opportunity to be of help in any way, whether it's support, getting an implant rep into practice to help them, taking them to a course, or just being a new friend, creates opportunity to build great relationships with referring doctors. And again, I can't stress the one thing that hasn't changed in 40 years. It's all about relationships, and that's human nature that will not be going away. Even, in social media, you're building a type of relationship, a meaning for social media influencers, not for surgeons. The world is about relationships in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Really good point. All right. Next point. What do you got for us?
Okay. The next one is huge. It might be the hugest. I'm not sure. If I had to pick one thing on these 25 points I have here, and we're only going to do some of them in this part one, this might be the biggest one. I've given this a lot of thought. You have to be likable. Surgeons are hard-charging people. Most of the world is not. Most GPs are what I would call passive-aggressive. It's just a description. It's not I don't criticize anybody. But for example, surgeons know this. If they're unhappy with you, they're not going to tell you. They're just going to refer elsewhere. I think being likable is one of the single most important factors. And likable to me doesn't mean fake. It means transparent. It means truly, if I could wave a wand for every surgeon listening to these podcasts, it would be to get up tomorrow morning and really want to serve your referral base. Really start to love your GPs. I know that sounds funny. It sounds touchy-feely, but it's real. If you can get up and love your customers, and that's who they are, because the GPs are your main customer, because they support your practice, and you can develop a likable personality, which is so easy. All you have to do is be interested in people, let them know you appreciate them, thank them with gratitude for supporting you, and be open whenever they ask you for anything. And you're likable. And if you can be likable and interested in them and their success and how they're doing and how you can help them, I think that might be the single biggest factor. I can't prove it, but I think an extremely high-end, great personality surgeon is going to win almost every time, as long as they're out there touching the referral base. The problem is some surgeons have great personalities, but only the patients get to see it. They're not doing referral marketing. So they don't build the strong relationships with the referral base. Again, I've said this before, Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I said that in another podcast. Read it once a year. I recommend it to everybody, including my own family. As my father did for me. And that book will transform you into a phenomenal communicator and a delightful person that people want to be around. And you want people to be attracted to you. So the opposite of why your referral marketing program can fail is having a bad personality. I've had surgeons over the years who have, chewed out a referring doctor or been unpleasant to a patient who went back and complained. I mean, this is not unusual. It happens. We all have a bad day. Be very, very careful. It takes years to build a great relationship and one incident to kill it. That is something you don't want to do. So you train yourself to always try to be likable and open and solve problems. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah, while you were saying that, I was totally thinking of that chapter in How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he says you need to get genuinely interested in other people. His quote was, I think he said, you can make more friends in 2 months by being genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get them interested in you. And that's for certain is the case. I feel like sometimes we'll show up maybe at a referring doctor's office, or, you see this all the time, but people will show up and they'll just start spewing forth their whole life story, telling you everything about them and not even ask you a single question about yourself. And there's not much connection there. It's kind of like, okay, whatever. But the person who comes, and is really asking you questions, is sincere, wants to know how you do things, they're complimenting you. I mean, that's someone that you connect with, and it's so powerful to ask the right questions and be interested.
Peter Drucker, the brilliant father of modern management, 39 textbooks, one of the greatest. You can't get through an MBA program without reading 10 Drucker books, had a great statement. It's more important to be interested than to be interesting. And I'll tell you a story. I'm embarrassed by this. I was a young dentist a couple months out. I was immature, I guess, compared to today. And a surgeon took me to lunch. I had no intention of taking out wisdom teeth. That was not something I wanted to do. In those days, a general dentist could build a practice pretty quickly doing, basic restorative dentistry, which I enjoyed. And there was no reason for this, but the surgeon took me to lunch and I was pleased to go. Somebody wanted to take me to lunch. That felt good. And then spent the whole lunch telling me why I was completely unqualified to take out teeth. Now, there was no reason for that. I hadn't sent him a broken tooth yet or anything like that. And I have to tell you that I never intended to take out teeth or do root canals or do ortho, and none of which I ever did in my 10 years. But I resented it. And now I say I'm embarrassed because that's a little immature maybe on my part back many, many years ago. But the fact is that I did resent it and I did not refer to him because I felt like he was demeaning me. Not that I didn't feel I was also unqualified to take out teeth, but he was so aggressive about it. It was almost like he was saying, you're a general dentist and you're an inferior clinician. And maybe I'm wrong, but I can tell you in those days, I still resented it and I did not refer to him because I was offended, and I apologize for that, but it doesn't mean other people don't feel that way. So I share that story. Always build up your referral base. Always make them feel important. Everybody wants to be important, no matter what stage of life they're in. Everybody wants to be recognized. Meet people where they are. There are going to be some people that place implants, but they're not going to place all the implants. Well, my attitude is then you want everything they're not doing. But telling them they're incompetent, as an example, would not be a good personality step to take. Now, I realize there's some people that mess up a lot of cases. That's a whole different management, referring doctor management protocol to be looking at. And along those lines, as we're moving along in the podcast, is not train. Another reason your referral marketing program can fail, staying with our theme, is not training your staff in customer service. I've seen so many examples where money is spent on referral marketing and good referral marketing and good strategies and a PRC, and the front desk in the surgical practice kind of sabotages it unintentionally on the other end. If you're going to have great referral marketing, you need a great person on that phone. They're the tip of the spear. They're the first person a patient talks to. If you get a call from a referring doctor, you ought to have a list at the front who's an A, B, C, or D, so you know what you need to do to satisfy them. But it's really, really important because so many dental staff and OMS staff are not trained in customer service. That's a killer. It can really hurt you. And I've seen many referring doctors turn off and go elsewhere because of front desk staff. We hear about this from our GP clients. We know it's real, and you never want that to happen. So you train your front desk that their first job above all others is customer service representative and working to satisfy every patient and referring practice.
I like that a lot. One comment I had was in regards to, maybe this is and you've talked a little bit about this in other podcasts of how to train your staff in customer service and the scripts and all the things you need to do to train them up. So important. I feel like it's oftentimes we usually just assume that these people come in trained, they know they're nice people, that, life has trained them how to be nice and kind. But I think some of the tips that you've recommended in other podcasts are so critical and so important to train and discuss with every single staff member.
Yeah, when I made this list, as I said, I held nothing back. And you should actually assume that the people coming in are not trained in customer service. It's not a natural thing. And we hire people for their skills, often, which is great if they have those skills, but it's often a mistake. Not to hire them for their skills. That's not the mistake. That's a good thing. But we have to assess not do they know customer service strategies, but are they open to learning them? You want what I call pleasers. You want people at your front desk that get up every morning to please other people, make people happy. They get a kick out of seeing people that are satisfied with everything that's been done. And they literally get upset when people are dissatisfied. That's a powerful thought process. And you want those kind of people working in your practice, because oral surgery is not just a medical business. It is a service business. And in service businesses, great customer service is going to win, unless the only way to be better, to ignore great customer service, is to be cheap. If you're the dollar store, you don't have to have great service. If you are Walmart, Walmart's the biggest retailer in the world. I wouldn't say they have great service. I would say they have great prices and great variety. An OMS practice that has great service is going to work toward that theme of being the dominant practice that I think is so important. And that's when you design your strategies around service, but people have to live up to it, or the referring doctors and patients will feel that they did not get the level of service they should have. And remember, I've said to you before, the one thing referring doctors want more than anything else is no problems. You do not want a patient going back unhappy, because that does not necessarily get reported to you. That's the passive aggressive, and they will gradually go elsewhere if that happens. Here's a great example. Over the years, I've been asked many times, a patient's unhappy, the referring doctor calls the surgeon. Should the surgeon give back the patient's money? Now, this is not an ethical debate. Ethically, in most cases, no. The job was done. It was done well. Patients aren't paying for you to be nice to them. They're paying for the implant case or the extraction or the sinus lift or the bone graft. So if we look at it that way, there's no code for customer service with insurance companies. But almost every time in talking to a surgeon, I will say, number one, if you give back this money, will you retire one day later? And of course, the answer is no. I mean, what case have you ever done that you'd retire later in a 40-year career, 36-year career, if you gave back the money? And number two, what I explain to them is, my view, this is just my opinion, you go to the max. The maximum result is give back the money, support the referring doctor, make the patient as happy as you can if they want their money back, if they're that unhappy. It should be pretty, if it's happening, by the way, if it's happening to you often, you've got a different kind of problem you need to go deal with. But the once in a blue moon, something like this happens, because there are crazy people in the world. Actually, those are the ones you should be most afraid of. But nonetheless, I usually recommend or at least guide them toward, you're right, you shouldn't have to give back the money, but the referral marketing strategy is to absolutely do it. You're never going to miss the money. It's not going to affect your year or your career, but you're supporting your referring doctor, and that's really important. And by the way, surgeons have every right to think I'm wrong, that again, moral authority says you shouldn't have to do that, but I'm coming from the referral marketing authority, which is, let's make this go away. That expression, make it go away. And one of my favorite expressions is, if you can write a check to make it go away, you never have a problem. So, make it go away is a good thing when that comes up. So, but it should be pretty rare.
100% with that.
Yeah. Also, you never know what comes next, like a lawsuit, or you lose the referring doctor, and you tell them, you get together and say, listen, everything was done properly, but you are very important to us. I'm going to refund the money to support you. One of my beliefs is, when you have a problem and you solve it, you strengthen the relationship, but you have to tell them. You don't just do it. You have to make it clear that you're doing it for them. That's really important.
Yeah. And I love how you made that distinction between what kind of problem is this, and you said it's not a moral problem. We need to think of it more as a practice building marketing problem. And that's the main issue, I think, is so many people get caught up because they are stuck thinking this is a moral thing. I did not do bad treatment. I did the correct treatment, right? And just morally, I cannot give that money back. Maybe it would be a statement that I didn't do what was morally right if I gave the money back. And there's too much getting caught up in that aspect of it and not enough on the marketing practice building, because I'm totally there with you. Like, I feel like if I can solve this problem by writing a check and giving money back, that's a win for me and a win for the patient. There's no hesitancy there. For sure, I would do that.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I think I'm living it. For many years, to be a client of ours, for example, just as a business example, had to sign a 12-month contract. Well, there was no way out once you signed that contract for any reason. Now we were always fair. If somebody got sick or sold a practice, I've always tried to treat people really well. But about 9 years ago, I said, okay, this is not philosophy I really want. The reason I always did that is that's how consulting firms work. That was the model. We're modeled after a very fine international Fortune 500 consulting firm. I mean, we're a small version of it. And I said, we're going to go to month, that any client can exit our program on 30 days notice at any time for any reason. And oddly enough, instead of taking a risk that people might not stay 12 months, and again, there's that occasional situation, or if somebody sells their practice or something happens, but instead it actually increased the longevity of clients by 50%. But they're making the choice, not because they're locked into a contract. And that fits exactly what I'm saying is, you want people, not for moral authority. If somebody drops out in 3 months, we put a lot more work in on the front end. Okay, that's not good. But on the other hand, they have to have a reason to stay. And if not, then I'm okay with them making a decision not to. So in business, you'll see a lot of that also. Nordstrom, you can return a pair of shoes a year later, even if you've worn them, if you're not happy with them, typically no questions asked. And that's partly how they built their reputation for customer service and became the great retailer that they are today. So, and it's even more important when it's online, because you don't know what's going to fit anyway. So you have to feel comfortable that you can return things if they don't work. So yeah, it's not moral authority. The surgeon did the right thing, but the smart thing is keep your customer satisfied and happy. It's a great opportunity to show how much you care.
That's awesome. Yeah. Any other points for this half of the podcast, or this first one?
Yeah, I'll end with a major point going back to the PRC. I can't stress how important this person is. As I said, without the PRC, eventually the surgeon's going to get tired or distracted, and the program, it may well fail, not can fail, it probably will. Train your PRC, at least in the early days. Spend time with your PRC, help her understand the strategies, who to visit. We even have an app. It's not Levin Group's app, but there's an app out there that will give you the delivery routes, because we would see a PRC go 10 miles in one direction, 15 miles in another direction to deliver. They don't necessarily know what strategies to pick, how to be efficient. So you want a great personality, a great attitude, and then you do need to train them. And every dollar you spend in training them will come back to you 3 or 4 times based on what I've seen. And again, that person will be the best investment most surgeons ever make, because after your first few years, you're not the one out there running around doing everything yourself. You can't. You don't have time. And that's when you need to really have a person you're training and document, because she is going to leave eventually. She may get sick. She may have to move. She may retire. Document so the next person can come right in and take over. You don't want what we call filing cabinet staff members. When they leave, they hold filing cabinets in their head and the next person starts from scratch. So, but a great PRC. I'll end with this story. There was a PRC who had been there for 21 years. So after 40 years, I've seen a lot. And they had a seminar. This practice had 2 big seminars a year. And they sent out an announcement that she would be retiring. And at the seminar, she received over 25 gifts from referring practices to her in honor of her retirement. That's what you want to build. When I first heard about it, it was very emotional to me, because I've met her and I knew her and I liked her, but they liked her so much and appreciated the relationship that in that seminar, 25 different offices brought her gifts for her retirement. I mean, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. So that's a good ending for part 1. And Grant, I promise you, I've got just as much for part 2. So if our listeners have enjoyed this, if we're helping them, and I sincerely hope I am, and we are, and your podcast is doing, just such a great job. I hear incredible things about it. I will bring the same level of practical to the next part as our first part.
Awesome. This has been awesome for me to hear. Very enlightening. I think super helpful for our listeners who are trying to strengthen their referral marketing program. So really good content. I appreciate you sharing this with us.
Oh, it's an honor and a privilege. And let's hope that we can keep going with great information.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Roger. Look forward to the next one.
Good. Thank you, Grant.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Everyday Oral Surgery. For more information on these podcasts, please visit everydayoralsurgery.com. I love feedback and would be very grateful if you would reach out to me via my email, grantstucki@gmail.com, and let me know what you thought of this episode. Or you can text me at 720-441-6059. Additionally, if you have any topics you'd like to hear about, or if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please email or text me. I found many of my interviewees through people who have been contacting me and have been listening, and I've gotten so many great ideas for more podcasts, and that's what helps keep the podcast rolling. So I really appreciate you making that extra effort and helping me out with feedback and knowing what to do next on the podcast. Thank you so much.